Hey everyone, we're Jeff and Shanti Feldhahn, and we are grateful to have the chance to share with you some more from our research about what creates a great marriage. Today, we're specifically going to be talking about money. Not how to budget or get out of debt, but how to have a great relationship around money.
As with our other projects, this was based on a research study, but it was not one that we ever expected to do. We had finished one major research project, and we were actually wondering if we would ever be able to do another one. The business model had changed, and these studies are really expensive, like well over $100,000. And we didn't know how we would be able to afford to do another one. So we started praying about it and got a call 10 days later, out of the blue, from a faith-based financial services company. And they said, look, money is one of the main issues in marriage, but we don't feel it has to be. How would you feel about making this your next research project and us funding it? And we were like, oh my gosh. And then we were like, oh my gosh. Because after all the years of research, this issue of money was the one area in our marriage we were absolutely not on the same page.
Now, we didn't fight about it, but we didn't thrive either. We sort of managed around it. We didn't talk about it, we coped with it. Does that sound familiar to anyone?
Probably.
Yeah, so we indeed end up doing a 3-year research project.
Yep.
And we wrote the book around that called Thriving in Love and Money. So what we're sharing today is a small part about what we found that really creates a great relationship around money.
So here's the one-sentence summary of everything that we found in this 3 years of research. When you're having tension about money, it's not about the money. It turns out it's about how money makes us feel and how it makes our spouse feel. And it's about all these kind of expectations that are running under the surface about how money should work, and these insecurities and these other beliefs and these worries.
And they're so built into our hearts and lives that they just feel natural, kind of like gravity.
It is.
The law of gravity.
And so let's give you an example. When we talk about it's not about the money, let's give you an example of what we mean. So classic little simple thing. I'm driving home from a long day of meetings, and Jeff is at home. The kids, he's just picked up the kids or whatever. And I call him and I'm like, I'm just going to go by a Chinese restaurant and pick up food for dinner. Just take out, $35, $40. And Jeff will go, well, we have some chicken in the fridge from Costco. Why don't I just grill that? Okay. Why does that bug me?
And I'm wondering, when she calls me, why does it bug me when she asks me that question?
And so that's just a silly little example. But in the research, as we started to realize, oh my gosh, it's about the stuff running under the surface, here eventually is what I realized that I'm thinking. We've been running in 100 different directions. We haven't had family time. We've been so busy. And, if we cook the chicken, like Jeff would be doing the work, but, there'd be a lot of prep time, and then not just eating the chicken, but then there'd be a lot of cleanup. And then pretty soon we're going to have to start like homework with the kids. And so $35 or $40 to buy this precious hour of family time, you bet. So that's what I'm thinking.
And what I'm thinking is, when she calls me, if we keep spending money on stuff like this without a plan, we could be homeless in retirement. So the solution
What's the
to this
solution?
is that you have to talk about it. And yes, that can be intimidating at first. We actually found out that 77% of couples can't talk about money well.
Yeah.
Now, 23% of couples can talk well.
You're mutants. We're jealous of you.
Yeah. And guess who tends to go to the church Dave Ramsey course?
Right.
It turns out it's mostly the people who already talk about money well to begin with.
Yeah.
So we have to get better at being able to communicate with each other. So one way to get started is to ask your spouse, what one thing could I do to make it easier for you to talk with me about money?
Yep. Now, one thing that will make talking easier for both of you actually is to realize at the beginning, you're not talking about the dollars and cents. You're not talking about the intimidating stuff. Remember, it's not about the money. It's about that stuff under the surface. So that's what you're actually going to be talking about.
Yeah, so in our research, we found 5 under the surface things, and we'll cover just one of them today. We saw this a lot when we would do call-in radio programs that talk about money and financial planning. Every single radio host told us that the top question they get on their shows was, how do I get my spouse on the same page with me about money? And we realized that the person is actually asking subconsciously that they're asking, how do I get my spouse to agree with my way of handling money, which is the right way?
It turns out that this dynamic is the most common reason for friction around money in marriage. And that dynamic basically can be summarized as we're just not valuing what the other person is valuing. So let me explain this concept. It turns out that even though we know that we're married to a different human. That we're married to somebody who's different from us, for some reason, it doesn't translate into our head that therefore this person is going to care about something different than I would care when it comes to managing and handling money and whatever. And the way they care about handling money, the way that matters to them, is just as legitimate as the way that I want to handle money. Now, except for objective problems like a gambling addiction, usually it's not that there is a right or a wrong. It's just different. Now, there are so many ways this plays out. Let's give a few quick examples. For example, suppose that one of you really, you both work really hard and one of you thinks, really, we need to be saving our money every year for a great vacation, something that will allow us to just get away and decompress for a couple of weeks and just get away. Like that's what we obviously should be doing. And the other person, and the other person thinks, we're so busy. And obviously what's really important is that we spend our money every 2 weeks to do a nice date night so that we connect regularly. And so we have that plan that we spend our money on. Now, are either of those right or wrong? No, they're just different. Another classic sort of values difference, how we're not valuing what the other person is valuing, is the classic kind of saver versus spender thing. In the Chinese food example that we said earlier, one of us was valuing spending to buy family time. The other was valuing saving to buy security. Or maybe, do you value spending money to save time or value spending time to save money? For example, suppose you're going to a really popular movie. Do you think it just makes sense to spend the $2 extra per movie ticket to reserve specific seats? He's shaking his head. To reserve specific seats ahead of time so you don't have to wait in line and risk it. Or do you think, it just makes sense? You just get there earlier and save the $2 per ticket. We just care about different things, and the conflict comes because we don't realize that we are not valuing the fact that this other person might legitimately care about something different or want to handle money very differently.
But we really don't see that that is what is happening.
Yep.
Instead, we have our ideas of how things should be, and we think, this is just the way it is. It's just logical. That, of course, you should get to the theater half an hour early and save the $2. It just makes sense when you look at it unemotionally. Now, a neurobiologist that some of you may be familiar with is Dr. Kurt Thompson. He said that it's actually what I just described to you. That's not how our brains actually work. He said human beings never make decisions only based on what makes sense. Rather, we make sense of what feels right. In other words, we rationalize and justify what we want. And then we say it's just logical. So what do we do about these different values differences? The main solution is that you have to try to understand and honor what matters to your spouse, even if you would still handle things differently.
Yeah, you don't have to agree.
Yeah, we actually have an example from our own life, not too long ago.
Yeah, in 2020, when COVID hit and there was this shutdown and all of a sudden everything just stopped, our income dropped through the floor because a lot of our income is based on events and those weren't happening.
In-person
events. And so, there was a lot of tension around money, and Jeff, to his credit, we had been trying to not avoid talking about money. And so he came to me and he said, look, I have to confess, I have to be honest with you. I'm dealing with a little bit of resentment because, if we hadn't gone to Disney World with the kids last year for vacation, or, if we hadn't gone out to eat those times or to bowling, we would have thousands more dollars in our bank account right now that we could really use right now. And then, to his credit, he actually came back and he said, what?
You're giving me a little too much credit because it makes it sound like I thought about this for a few minutes and came back. Actually, I thought about it for a few days and then came back.
But you came back. And what he said was, I realized, you know what? That's not entirely fair. Because when we went to Disney, you were building memories as a family. And when we would go out to eat with the kids or go to bowling or whatever, you were building togetherness and closeness as a family. And now we're on top of each other in quarantine and we like each other. And I think the thing that you said that was really interesting to me is you said, as a sort of a saver person, you said, I've always thought of spending money as just a net cost. That's all it is. It's a net outflow, a net cost. And he said, I realize that you think of it as an investment. There's a benefit that you're getting back.
Now, I do still think that we could have handled some of those togetherness things a little more cheaply. We could have taken a picnic in the park instead of eating out. But I do realize now that what she was valuing was just as legitimate as what I was valuing.
So in other words, work to understand and honor what your spouse values, even if you disagree. The fact that Jeff did that he came back and said, oh, you are building closeness, like it was an investment in the family. The fact that he did that changed everything about how I responded. Because I hate to say this, but usually when he would come to me and want to talk about money, I had all my walls up. I was so defensive. But when he said, I understand what you were caring about here, all of that defensiveness melted away and I could really hear him. And that made it much easier for me to honor and understand what mattered to him and embrace the austerity plan that needed to happen to make it through the next few years of the pandemic.
Yeah. Now, there's no magic formula that will help you suddenly be on the same page about money.
No.
But
I wish there was.
Yeah.
But no.
And it's especially easy for those of us who are the saver planner types to have strong opinions and essentially shut down our spouse by implying their way is wrong. But if the goal is to come together around money, we have to both honor one another. And we hope this will give you just a little starting point about what it looks like and get you started talking.
Because we found that honestly for us makes all the difference.
Yeah, and thank you for taking the time to invest in your marriages.